Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to An Eternal Soul in a Physical World. This is episode 51, and it is the first episode in a series of podcasts about self-love. And today I am not alone in this podcast. I have Rebecca Davison with me, who is an intuition coach, and she's been in this business for as long as I have, if not longer, or I don't even know, probably about the same. So it's been really inspiring growing alongside Rebecca and seeing her business flourishing, and she has been an inspiration of mine because, you know, for a lot of people it is quite hard to run a business like this, and Rebecca has been doing it beautifully and successfully for all this time. And she has an intuitive abundance podcast that is on iTunes, and she runs an intuitive life academy. So her whole thing is about teaching people how to use their intuition to get what they want, or tap into that as a source of authentic guidance to move them in the direction of whatever it is, their purpose or whatever they came here to experience. So I thought Rebecca would be a good person to talk to today, because we've just finished a series, actually, Rebecca, in the Patreon group of mine about this similar thing of using our higher guidance to create with us. So that's quite a nice little follow on. But today we want to talk about self-love. So the thing that we want to talk about is, what is self-love really? Because people get a bit confused about this, don't they, Rebecca? Like, you would have seen people going through a lot of confusion about what is actually loving myself. And I want to talk about the difference between self-love with a small s, as in loving the ego, and self-love with a big S, as in love that comes from being connected to source. So I'll just let you tell us, Rebecca, what are you seeing with your clients in this area? I mean, are you seeing many people who are really able to love themselves with a capital S, who have that connection? Is it something that's hard to find, or are you seeing more of it these days? Or tell us your take on it.
This is a really interesting conversation, because often too, I think sometimes it can be really easy to kind of make the ego wrong. But I think love with a capital S is really loving all of it. And what I mean by that is that it's like we were designed with an ego, and as we know, the ego loves to judge things and label things and often separates us from source energy. But I think when you are owning your value and seeing yourself as whole, you're also loving the fact that you are designed this way and that you do have an ego, and you're in acceptance of it. For me personally, I don't really think about self-love anymore, but I'm very aware of how I feel. And I think that's what people want, is to be in that place where they just feel good in their body. And I think when we're more aligned with the universe and understanding that our suffering is created because we are separate from source energy, and we can shift at any moment back into that place of like, I've remembered who I am, right? I'm a limitless being in a body. The suffering is not actually necessary, and again, but to be the person who's having a great relationship with yourself, because that's what's going to feel good. That's what's going to feel safe. Like, for example, if you went to a party and you met somebody at the party, this is what you do, right? You ask them questions. You start getting information from them. You start creating a rapport. You start learning more about them. You start getting a vibe from them and whether they're open and friendly. We kind of want to do this with ourselves. So for me, really, self-love is that process of showing up and being interested in ourselves. And sometimes that can take a little bit of effort, right? Taking our attention back from what everybody else is doing or saying or feeling, and bringing ourselves some peace and some presence, and actually asking ourselves things like, how am I actually feeling in this moment? And moment to moment, like people who have moment to moment awareness of their actual feelings, they're going to be experiencing a lot of expansion. Now, expansion is always desirable, right? We know the scale of consciousness, which is shame and guilt and anger and rage and all the, the negative emotions are more contracted for our energy field. When we shift up, we move out, which is what everybody wants. They want to experience the happiness and the joy. So I think oftentimes, right, like when we're going through that journey, like it depends on where we're at. Like if we're suffering, I think one of the things to aim for is just neutrality, right? That in itself is a self-loving act, right? To go, this is where I'm at and it really sucks and it's really painful, but I'm not going to make it worse by allowing my mind to judge me and say this is wrong. I'm just going to find what it is to get myself to a place where I feel more neutral. Oftentimes too, right, I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves because this is funny things that can happen in spiritual communities, right? They go, oh, I'm having a bad day or I feel bad. And then people go, I'm stuffing up my manifestations, like my life's a mess, right? And it goes into a downward spiral and it kind of contracts your energy even more. And it makes it worse for yourself. Being the person who's like, if I am feeling bad, how can I aim for neutral? If I'm feeling neutral, how do I go into more expansion, right? Because again, but making it easy for yourself, I think one of the best things we can do is learn how to value all of our experience, right? Like there's nothing wrong. Like if you can get to that place where there's nothing wrong with your suffering, that's going to have more space to be able to move you to neutrality. If there's nothing wrong with being neutral, that's going to have more space to be able to move you into something more positive. But people can put a lot of pressure on themselves and it's really easy to, right? Like you go out onto social media or Instagram or whatever and you see people having these luxurious, glamorous lifestyles and you can look at yourself and kind of go, well, I'm not experiencing that, so there must be something wrong with me. Big part of that is learning how to take your focus away from that and back to yourself and even asking yourself those questions like we would if at a party. How are you? What is coming up for you? How are you feeling? And willing to ask ourselves those questions. Now, the irony is, you could say that the ego is kind of in the brain, right? Because the brain can often go, it can notice the sensations in the body, and then it goes, that's not safe, right? The brain goes, makes those decisions like those feelings are big and I can feel them, the sensation of them in the body, and I need to get away from that. So that's why we end up getting stuck in our to-do lists. I've got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. Or, like often that's, the seat of often a lot of addiction, right? Because we're like, I can't stand this sensation. I'm going to go do something to shift how I feel, smoke a cigarette, have a drink, go shopping, whatever it is. But the work is to learn to cultivate the courage really to go, how am I feeling? I know even if it is painful, it's not going to kill me. But this is often why we benefit from being facilitated, right? Because we don't really often have the skill set to go deep within ourselves by ourselves if we've never been taught how to do that. Sorry, you want to say something?
No, I'm cool if you want to carry on.
So this learning how to have a relationship with yourself that really works for you. And again, that's integrating a lot of things, right? Like the information that you're getting from your body, the awareness that you're having from your soul, your connection to source energy and the collective in terms of spirit, and then also your own mind. I think a lot of times one of the easiest places to start is in the mind, right? To go, what am I actually telling myself? And how does that make me feel? Because when you clean up your thoughts, and if you get, and I spent a little bit of time doing this, right? Like over a period of about 2 years, I was very, very, very aware of what I was saying to myself. And I kind of made a commitment to myself that if I couldn't think something that was at least neutral, if not positive, then I was going to shift the energy around it. So I did a lot of clearing statements for a long time, right? Clearing statements, folks, is when you're connected to source energy and you're asking the universe to clear the energy basically out of what you're saying. But I did that consistently because the way I was thinking was contributing to sensations in my body that felt terrible. I'd drive to work and I'd be like, feeling heavy or feeling depressed or whatever, and then just being like, oh my goodness, look at my thoughts. And this is, the thought creates a chemical reaction, which creates a sensation in the body, which makes you feel like rubbish. So pulling that up, so you're creating a new neural pathway. So even if your brain can't think something positive, maybe it's just not thinking anything at all, right? To get you back to a stage where you can reset your mind. And again, this requires vigilance. This requires attention, and this requires self-focus. I like one of the first steps to enlightenment, right, is always going to be self-inquiry. What do I actually believe, right? How do I actually feel about that? What do I know to be true for me? Those kind of, just like you would if you were at the party with a person, right? Like, what are you into, etc. But starting to with ourselves. Now, but let's talk about ego stuff though, because ego,
So we've been in the Patreon group. We've been, well, a lot of the podcasts are focused on the idea that we have this separated, kind of identity that we hang around and kind of pretend is us, and it's really just a whole collection of stories that we keep needing to maintain to kind of maintain the sense that I am a person. But there is this deeper, obviously, sense of ourselves when we meditate, when we relax into that flow that exists beyond the kind of crunchy limited personal self. And I watched an interesting, well, it was kind of just this quick little YouTube clip the other day of Sonia Choquette, and she was saying talking about self-love, and self-love is really when it's sticking with yourself. It's not abandoning yourself. It's staying with yourself through, whatever you're going through. And I thought that was a great way to look at this, because there's self-love with the small s, which kind of can look like I'm going to get a manicure, I'm going to get this, I'm going to do my hair, I'm going to, whatever, eat healthy, or whatever that might be an ego thing that you do, it might not, but, this is the thing that we need to talk about, right? And then there's the self-love with the capital S, which is more what you're saying, like tuning into, well, how am I really feeling? And how can I be with myself? How can I honor myself? How can I love myself, or at least bring myself to neutrality, like you just said? And I think this is the thing, isn't it? Like, how do we know what's what? Like, because it can get really confusing. I might think I'm going to look after myself by doing something nice for somebody else, for example, because that makes me feel good. But is it really coming from love, or is it coming from a place in me where I need love? And I'm doing that to make them love me. For example, it can get really confusing in our heads. So I don't know if I've kind of swung us off from what you were going to just say, but I think
the answer to that is that your body is going to tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like when your mind thinks that you're being genuine about something, but you can kind of feel dissonance in your body. Your body's kind of giving you feedback, or it's like, maybe you should check your intentions there. We do those kind of things, right? Like sometimes, I have a friend who used to do that. She used to give a lot of gifts because she was wanting validation in return, and people didn't give it to her, and then she would get really resentful and frustrated, right? But learning, right, that you want to check your intention behind your giving. Because, and maybe you actually need to learn what it is to give to yourself. And maybe, whatever you're buying isn't actually going to soothe that feeling. Right? So asking yourself, what does this part of me actually need in order to feel safe, healed, accepted, loved, whatever it is. And that, that takes courage. There are a lot of times that people struggle to do that. But the thing is, it's like going to the gym, right? Like when you first start, you might be like, oh my goodness, I can't even pick up, 5 kilograms or whatever. But if you're consistent and you keep on showing up, it just gets easier and easier and easier, right? Because you get stronger and stronger and stronger. But I think, just like in any relationship, what dynamic do you want to say? You want that person, you want them to know that they've got your back.
Yeah.
So you know that you've got your back. And a lot of times people go, oh, what's trust? And it kind of becomes this big enigma. And it's like, trust is you showing up for yourself.
Yeah.
Trust is you backing yourself. Trust is you telling yourself the right stories about your capabilities and about what's possible for you. Because when you have that from the mind and it drops down into all the cells of your body, then it's easy to go do the things, right? Because it's like, I freaking believe in myself. And a lot of times too, spiritual people can get confused between self-love with a capital S, small love with a, self-love with a small s, and being powerful or stepping into their power or being confident or being a leader. Right?
Oh, yes. So talk about this. How does this show up?
Like I had a call with a client the other day, and I can remember, and we were talking about what it takes to really step into leadership and power in her business, right? And she was like, oh, am I being in my ego? And I was like, no. But people get confused about all that time, right? They think if I'm too certain, or if I'm too bold, or if I'm too powerful, that somehow that's a bad thing. And we get messages, subconscious and otherwise, like sometimes just blatant all the time, right? That it's not okay to embody our true power.
Yeah.
But when we do, which is what everybody wants, right? Because what everybody wants, whether they're aware of it or not, is they want to feel more God in their body. That's what everybody wants. Why do you desire something? Because on some level, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, you believe that in the having of it, you're going to feel more God in your body.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Like I've talked about this before. I talked about it just recently about manifesting a big lump sum of money, right? And thinking it was going to make me really happy, and then realizing that it doesn't, because money can't give you anything, right? It's just, again, kind of an idea or an illusion to a certain respect. And yes, it's, when it's in your bank account, it becomes very real, right? But there's nothing like money to activate the ego.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like whenever there's money, there's people like getting activated all the time, right? Because it's about their value proposition. But the irony is, the more you value yourself, the more you are actually seeing yourself through the eyes of God, and the more you actually allow yourself to receive. So that's why I actually love money as a pathway to your creator ability, because it's forcing you in a quite often confronting, abrupt way to look at how much you are valuing yourself.
So let me just repeat that. The more you value yourself, the more you're seeing yourself through the eyes of God. And the more I can't remember what the last little bit you said there was, but
really allow yourself to receive what it is that
really allow yourself to receive. Absolutely. And that's a really good thing to write on a piece of paper and put on your wall, isn't it? The more I value myself, the more I'm seeing myself as God sees me. Yes. And the more I can receive the things that I want to receive.
Yeah. I think also too, one of the hardest things for people when life doesn't go the way that they want, or something terrible happens, like a tragedy, they find it all too easy to kind of go, again, consciously, unconsciously, that means that the universe doesn't love me.
Yeah.
That is incorrect. And that is where the ego blocks us, right? The ego goes, it doesn't look the way I want it to look, so therefore the universe doesn't love me. Now that is hard though, right? That is edgy. Because like if you've lost a child, it could be very easy to feel like God has abandoned you. But that's the work, right? To come back and go, how, even though my circumstances may not look like I want them to look like, how can I allow more source energy in? Because that is the frequency of love, of course. We all know, if you've ever had an energy healing, those feelings of delight, divine love frequency that come forward in your body. When you feel that way, everything is just fine and peachy. We all know on some level that is available to us. It's kind of coded into our cells, which is great. It's the universe reminding us it is available to you. Our work is to tune into it and tune into it and tune into it, and be so good at tuning into it that we end up staying and living in that frequency.
Yeah, becomes the norm.
Yeah, and you're choosing it on a consistent basis. But a big part of that process, right, is to be aware of how you're feeling. The more aware you are of your feelings, Right. And sometimes that's scary for people because if they have blocked their feelings for the last 30, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
right, then starting to lean into them, it can feel like, whoa, right? That's a really good time to be facilitated.
Yeah.
Because then you can realize that it's actually okay. You can just expand. You can bring some loving presence to that. You're going to be all right. You're going to move through it. The energy shifts.
Absolutely.
Energy and emotion, it's all good. Even taking the story out of the emotion and you realize it's just a sensation in the body,
Yeah.
shifts really fast.
Yeah. And it's just learning that little skill set and not making those feelings so real. Hey, like you say, take the labels off, it's just a feeling in my body. And it's been stuck in there for a bloody long time, and it's built up all these other stories around it, and it's all like, and it can be this massive wow that a big cry might be needed or whatever it might be. But once that initial kind of cork comes off, if you like, the energy can start to flow in a more consistent way, where the things coming up aren't as massive and they are more able to just be worked through as you gain that kind of confidence that is something that is a natural and healthy self-love action to take, isn't it? To look after ourselves in that way.
Your emotions aren't going to go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, no matter how much time you've got left on the planet, you're still going to have emotions.
Yeah.
The thing is as well, like I get kind of discerning about emotions too, because some emotions are created by a story that you tell yourself in your head, like I'm not good enough or I'm crap or whatever. And again, that creates a feeling in the body. That's completely incorrect. That's kind of like an emotion that you just want to nip it in the bud by not allowing yourself to think that. So if you are having shitty thoughts, how do I shift my attention back to something that is true? Like maybe I'm going to focus on the time that I did actually overcome that obstacle, or, I extended myself and created a more loving situation, right? And you always have a choice about that. So I think mindset is really important in terms of focus, but also too, like there's other like deeper, more primal emotions. Like if you lose a loved one, that is going to be more of a primary emotion that is just going to need to be felt. Yeah. And that's also a skill set too, to be able to be present to it, to accommodate it, accept it, not judge it, be there for it and allow. Sometimes it's big energy, right, that needs to roll through. And sometimes it's just, I just need to be with this and soften this and allow it to shift. But discernment, right, is going, what do I need to give myself? When we have super high accountability for ourselves, then everything in terms of relationships take care of themselves, because we're the ones showing up to our emotions and our experience. Right. And it doesn't actually matter. And this can be a big thing for people who are like myself, like ex-codependent, right? Where you're like, people around you are unhappy or distressed, etc. And then you're kind of going, oh, you're unhappy. But if you know what it is to take care of your own emotions, you will be okay with them being unhappy. Now, I know, right, to the rational mind, the mind can go, oh, that means that I don't care about them. That's incorrect. You're actually honoring and respecting them more by saying, that's your stuff. And I trust that you are also connected to source energy, and you also have the skill set, if you so desire, to take full accountability for your own emotions. I'm taking accountability for mine. What you choose to do with yours is up to you, but I'm also very aware of the fact that your emotions are not my responsibility. That's a big lesson to learn, right? Again, as somebody who has been codependent and wants everybody else to be okay and kind of like, if they're not, right? To come back to self and go, all I need to do is take care of me. This can be a big thing too, I'm sure, as a parent.
Yeah.
Helping your children facilitate themselves in regards to their own emotional regulation.
Yes, it's a big topic, and it's an interesting path to travel. There is that different relationship of the parent-child where they don't have those skills, to manage their own emotions, and then, your relationship with another adult. But again, that other adult might not have the skills to deal with their emotions either. But like you say, it's not it's not your job to do that for them. It's your job to handle whatever responses are coming up within you and to be with that. And then to be able to communicate that is another skill in itself.
Yes. I think that can be, like sometimes I think when we talk about emotions, people can feel like, oh, it feels like hard or messy or difficult. And it doesn't actually have to be. First and foremost, it's like identifying how I feel. Like if I was just starting again in regards to emotions, I would print out a list, right? My mum had it on her fridge for a while, which was all the different emotions. So you can tune in and ask yourself, how do I feel today? And then maybe even, look at the list and kind of see if you can identify the feeling that you're experiencing in your body. Because, there's always a sensation, but the sensation has nuance, right? The sensation, like sometimes you might be feeling sad, but underneath the sadness, there's actually anger.
Yeah.
Right? Or vice versa. So sometimes, getting good at identifying in the first instance, this is how I actually feel. And then being able to express it is massive. I had a circumstance on the internet the other day, right? Like where was somebody came onto my page and was quite full on. And I actually said, I had to check myself, right? Being codependent. I was like, oh, am I going into a little bit of victim, right? But I was like, no, this is exactly how I feel. And I said to her, I feel you're being unkind, right? It collapsed the whole dynamic because nobody can argue with your feelings.
Yeah.
Right. And, that maybe wasn't her intention, but that's how it kind of came across. Right. So, and she actually apologized, which was really nice. She go, yeah, you're not understanding that the way that you're coming across here is kind of a little bit full on for me as an empath and sensitive. And we have to take responsibility for, what's going on for you versus what's going on for me. It's always our interactions, right? And often too, especially if we're dealing with somebody who's challenging, that's when our self-love needs to increase, right? Be really there for ourselves. And it's easy, right, in those moments to abandon self. It's easy to go, oh, I'm just going to go and do this thing, right? Like whether it's vacuum cleaning or pick up the dry cleaning or whatever, to try and not think about it or want to shift your focus to something that doesn't feel quite so uncomfortable, perhaps.
Yeah.
Bigger shift, like if you are feeling any kind of discomfort, it is to be there and to be present and to go, how do I actually feel? Where is this coming from? To keep on asking the questions, right? Like often in my work, we ask, is this connected to something that happened in the past? What age were you? Who did you pick it up from, etc.? Whereabouts in the body is it? Because your body will tell you all that information. Sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes it might be just, oh, look, I'm telling myself a story. Other times it might be, what does this emotion actually need right now?
Yeah.
If I could switch, what would I be choosing instead? Sometimes there's just parts of you that are scared or frightened. And they actually just some reassurance. They're just like, no, it's okay for you to choose you. Right? Like when that situation happened for me, I was afraid, right? Like my initial reaction was like, whoa, right? It was just like, I could feel my heart start beating faster and there was fear coming up in my body, like a feeling of like I'm being attacked, right? But it also, and I felt small, right? But for me to be able to express myself and say, identify, I feel you're being unkind, right? I wasn't saying she was being unkind. I was saying, this is how I feel. So she had the opportunity to turn around and say, well, this is my experience. But to express that, that does take courage, right? That means I'm owning my experience here to be able to say, this is how I'm feeling. When you do that, and especially in relationships, right? Like, that's such a powerful tool to even speak to how you feel in your body. Like, because people often don't realize or don't take it on board, but it can stop people in their tracks, right? When somebody says something to you and you say, oh, I can feel my heart starting to beat faster, they're going to stop and pay attention. Because what you're saying is starting to have an impact on me. Or I'm noticing that I've got, I'm feeling really tight in my shoulders when you said that. And again, we're not doing that from a place of like, I'm saying this to manipulate you to stop, right? We want to check ourselves, right? I'm saying this because I'm expressing how I'm feeling. And again, your body's going to tell you if you're saying it to try and manipulate somebody.
Yeah.
You're going to feel that tension in your body. And again, it's just that there's part of you that you've missed that's probably still scared that if you don't manipulate that person, that you're maybe not going to get one of your needs met, or somehow you're going to lose something.
Yeah.
That part of you that's actually looking for the love.
That's right. So in that situation then, like, let's say you're having an argument with a loved one, or you're being so-called attacked or challenged on Facebook or something in the moment is intense. How do you not abandon yourself in that moment? And how do you, I know there's different levels depending on how many tools you've personally got and how much self-love you've already gathered. But let's say somebody hasn't really gathered that much self-love, or hasn't been actively, living in that way for, as long as, say, you or I have been doing all this stuff. How would they not abandon themselves in a really simple way in those heated kind of moments? Because another side shoot to that is, if you did lash out, like if you lashed out at that person who was saying those things on your Facebook page, would that be abandoning yourself?
Okay, there's kind of two questions, right?
So no, there's two questions in there.
Okay, so the second question I'll start, because that's kind of what first comes to mind. Abandoning yourself, maybe a little bit, in the respect of, am I really in touch with how I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because anger, and that's one thing, it's so funny that you mentioned that, anger is there to want to protect you.
Yeah.
Right? So anger comes up to go, I've got to fight this, right? Shit, I've got to react, and again, and it can be very easy to do that. But that's kind of like the ego reaction, right? The knee jerk, how, and that's what the ego is, right? It's a reflex. When you go to the doctor and they hit you with a little hammer and your leg goes like that. Checking yourself, right? Because to have, and that's why we want to become the observer, right? To kind of go, oh, wow, look, like I talked to you about that the other day, right? Like about kind of referring to my ego like Lassie, and it's like, like Lassie's off like a shot, bounding over all the fences before you've even had a chance. She just reacts.
Yeah.
To call yourself kind of coming back to self and kind of going, oh, actually, how am I really feeling? I'm noticing that the anger is coming up. I'm noticing that the anger is there because it's trying to protect me. I'm noticing that there's another part of me at the same time that's fearful, and that's why the anger's come up, because the anger's like, I'm going to save the day. I'll make it better for you, right? But then dropping into an even deeper place of awareness to go, what is the true emotion here, and how do I express that? Yeah, and I was feeling all those things. Did I have enough courage to really share that with her in that moment? No, because I also didn't know her. If that had been a loved one, I might have said, I feel scared, I feel angry, I feel confused, maybe. So in abandoning yourself, being honest with yourself, right? How is it that I'm really feeling? Yes, I'm feeling angry, but anger, or any emotion, right, is never the other person's fault. You have to own it. You have to be like, this is my emotion. And then asking yourself, why is this emotion present? Like, I figured it out, right? Like, I knew that I was scared, and then I knew that the anger was there because I was scared. But not everybody has that level of awareness, right? They just go, I feel angry and it's your freaking fault.
Yeah.
The next level is, I'm angry, and this is me being accountable to my anger before I actually say something. So yes, in a way, you could consider it abandonment in the respect that, am I truly being honest with myself? Have I allowed the emotion to rule me, or am I taking ownership of the emotion? To be the person who's like, yeah, this is me. I can be the observer of my own. I can see my ego, right, bouncing around. I can see there, I can see anger, I can see all these characters.
Yeah.
But what am I going to choose next?
Exactly. And I think that that's a great point, that, you know, because it is kind of like abandoning yourself, because you've left your center with source, and you've jumped onto that personal self, that those stored, you know, whatever blocks, and you've jumped onto them. You've jumped on Lassie's back. You've been like, woo, let's go, Lassie. Let's give them something. Let's tell them what we really think. And then in doing that, you're running further away from your connection with yourself and your truth, because ultimately we don't really hate that person. You know, if we cut back all the layers, we don't really want to do that. We don't want to act in that way. We don't, you know, we're not really, that's not the highest ideal or objective, really.
That's the thing though, right? And this is why I'm actually developing something on this at the moment. Like, empathetic people can take an kicking.
Get taken what, sorry?
Take an ass kicking, right? Because they will often make themselves wrong.
Yes.
Before they will upset other people.
Yeah.
Right.
And take too much responsibility for what somebody else is doing. Yes, yes. Oh gosh, I'm guilty of that.
If they're triggered or they're upset.
Yeah.
Right. And and the way to really protect yourself in those circumstances is to be very clear of what your values are, be very clear of what your standards are, and be very clear on what your boundaries are. Now, sometimes people with boundaries, again, you know, you have to be aware, values, standards, and boundaries, how your ego can play with all this stuff.
This is where it gets tricky, isn't it?
Because the ego can be like, this is my standard and you're not good enough, you don't meet my standard.
Exactly. And that cuts off a whole level of acceptance and intimacy that could actually work. It's kind of putting a wall up, isn't it?
Yeah. So the way to kind of, I think, shift around that is to go safety, right? Am I allowing my human to feel safe? You know, like, what am I doing to contribute to my human feeling safe? Because your soul's like, I got this, I'm all good. Right.
And actually it doesn't matter what happens, because you know what? We're going to go back to where we came from, and it ain't going to make no difference.
Yeah, but the human, right, has a central nervous system and, you know, is constantly monitoring your environment, like your body. You need to feel safe.
Yeah.
So, but again, safety comes from within. Again, it doesn't, and this is often where people get tripped up, right? They look out into the world and they see a lot of unsafety, or they feel it. And then they make themselves smaller, rather than going, no, what do I need to do in order to create a feeling of safety in my life, in my body, in my world? And that is really, ironically, what you're talking about, which is not abandoning yourself in those circumstances, because you know that no matter what happens, you are going to back yourself. And it's not just spirit backing you, because I think often people give their power away to the universe and go, well, I'm waiting for the universe to say yes to me. And it's like the universe is going, I'm waiting for you to say yes to you.
Yeah.
So you need to say yes to me. I'm backing myself. I'm seeing myself as valuable. I know myself as worthy. I know myself as worthy of having all my emotions beyond ego, because the ego loves to go, this emotion's right and this one's wrong. And if you feel that way, then you're wrong. Letting all of that go, allowing all of it to be present, right? Whatever it is. And then really being in that space of kind of going, well, again, you know, like, I think probably too, I think a lot of times, like, I look back when I was younger and I did a lot of things that were incredibly unsafe, and I was really unhappy because of it. But realizing that it was up to me to create the safety, and knowing that if something gets too heated, that I am going to walk away.
Yeah.
You know, because if it's too much for my body, I will do that to support myself.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, the faster you respond, the more you will end up trusting yourself. Right? Like, if you walk into a room and you feel the vibe and the vibe doesn't feel good, if you stay there for an hour and a half, you know, like, your body's going to be like distressed.
Yeah.
You walk in and you're like, I can't be here, right? 2 minutes, right? Because it's just not good. Your body's going to be like, phew, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be really aware of all the psychic information that we're getting, because your body is telling you. Your body,
Yeah,
is that safe? Is that not safe? This environment feels good. This doesn't. This feels out of my control. But we also have to take responsibility for it.
yeah,
And when you've experienced a bit of trauma, which is just unprocessed emotion, right? And it's bouncing around your body, sometimes you do just need to disconnect from the rest of the world and do some deeper work on yourself and shift all that, because you want to get to a stage where you can be very expansive in your energy, because that's going to be having the best fun. That's what it feels like to be more godlike in a body, right? That's what the universe is doing, continuously expanding, and to really love yourself enough to receive the value that comes from having that experience.
Yeah. And so, like, I really love that point of that when we do things that aren't connected to love, or you know, when we run away with Lassie, we are trying to protect ourselves ultimately, but actually we're running away from what is actually our safety, which is our connection with ourselves, which is our connection with love, because love is our safety. That whole feeling of I got you, no matter what that person says, no matter what situation we walk into, no matter what we're doing, I got you. And I think that's that real feeling of self-love, that trust, as you say. I don't really need to trust what's going to happen out there. The only thing I can really trust is that I got this, I got me, I got my own, you know, connection within. And that connection starts by being aware of how I'm feeling in this moment, and being able to support myself wherever I'm at with that, because that's the safety, that's the love. And then when we feel more and more and more that way, we're able to radiate these higher dimensions, or higher thoughts, or loving energy, or our purpose, or whatever, you know, more effortlessly onto the planet. Because otherwise we're just blocking it, aren't we, with all the, oh, I can't do that, oh, I don't like that, oh, you know, like the fears and the and stuff. So yeah, that's a really, really, really good point. So I thought maybe it'd be quite, oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, there is a caveat to this though, right? Because, you know, I think empaths struggle with this a lot, which is making those decisions for themselves. Because, for example, if you have somebody in your life who is kind of, I don't know, negative, you're the one who determines what you're going to put up with.
Yeah.
Like, I have some people in my life and they're not in a great vibration, and that has resulted in people pleasing, wanting them to be happy, them not really choosing that. So eventually, because of your standards, you do actually need to kind of go, does this fit with my standards of what I am choosing to allow into my energetic field? And if it doesn't, then to actually be okay with going, okay, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just common things, right? Like, I want to be spoken to with respect, or I want somebody to communicate with me and tell me what the problem is, or I want somebody to own their own emotions, right? Rather than going into blame or judgment or criticism. So, you know, like this is the thing, that we will understand how to do that when we're checking in and having a relationship with ourselves, right? Like, I was in a dynamic for a long time where I wanted, and again, when you want something, that's always the ego too, right? Like the ego wanting something from a relationship, for example. Desire is different in terms of like, I want to create this is my vision, this is my purpose. But talking about wanting something from somebody, whether it's validation, acknowledgement, communication, whatever it is, when you want something, the ego can keep you stuck in there, because it can convince you, right, that there's something wrong with you because they're not communicating with you, or there's something wrong with you because they're so angry with you, etc., etc. Eventually, for me to actually come to the place where it's like, I let go of wanting anything, shifted the dynamic so completely, it's actually easier for me to love them, but I still not actually have anything to do with them. Right? So again, some of this is not easy and it's not very clear.
No.
But to me, it's like, what does respect look like for me?
Yeah.
What does it look like to create an environment where I get to feel safe?
Yeah.
Because, you know, those two things go hand in hand. When you're respecting yourself, you're valuing yourself, and knowing what the standards are for yourself are really important, right? So know that somebody isn't going to yell at you. Like, that doesn't meet my standards for how I am treated in my reality. So if you continue with that behavior, I'm going to remove myself. It makes it really crystal clear. And that certainty creates safety. And I think that's, you know, so, you know, like, it's on both sides, right? Yes, we want to be a limitless soul who forgives everybody, everything, but we also want to do the work to make sure our human is safe.
Yeah, and it's getting those two things in a good balance, isn't it? Because that can get, if it leans over one way too far, we can get way too cagey and wally and maybe almost kind of superior in a way. We can, you know, well, I don't want you to, you know, like, treat me like that and I'm better than that, and, you know, you're not, you're doing that, and it can be like this ego battle that can happen. And then if we don't bring in that element of, well, you know, we're both equals, we're both limitless souls, you know, just playing out this avatar and playing out this unique perspective, sources looking through us, and we're both really the same at essence, and no matter what you do and say, it's all okay, it's all, you know, all of that, you know, really transcendental stuff. Like, we can't completely go that way, because like you say, we have to have boundaries, but we can't, if we go completely the other way, then it doesn't really work either. It's really getting that balance, and that's an art, man. That's a freaking art. Being in a relationship myself, whoo, baby.
Yeah, I get it. And it's a relationship you're going to have for the rest of your life. So, but again, a good litmus test could be, if this was happening to a friend of mine, what would I wish them?
Yeah.
You know, like, to kind of take yourself out of it, because sometimes when we're in it, it can feel like it's harder to be more objective. So to put, you know, another person in the role, what would you wish for them? That can help sometimes to just create a little bit of space to be able to see it more clearly and kind of go, would, you know, like, if that person was being spoken to like that, how would I feel about it in relationship to that? If that behavior was continuing, would I wish that for my friend? You know, that can be a good litmus test, right? To kind of go, and if the answer is hell no, then that's your answer, right? To be able to go, okay, well, what choice am I going to make in relationship to my own standards, values, and boundaries in terms of creating more safety for my human?
Yeah. And I think when you're in that situation and you make that decision for yourself and you mean it, you create an energetic shift within yourself that shifts the whole dynamic of the relationship. And it either needs to, you know, you need to change how that, you know, your kind of proximity in that, or, you know, that person will shift to accommodate your shift. It's kind of one or the other, but it starts with you making that decision for yourself. And, you know, it can sound like it is a hard thing to get to that place, but it takes time. And I think what it takes is enough suffering to go, I am not doing this, not for one more day, not for one more minute. I am going to look at what choices I'm making here that are enabling the situation to keep reoccurring. How am I thinking about this? Or what is my belief? Or how am I allowing this? Because it's always something that we're thinking, that we're doing, that is allowing that to perpetuate. And it's always a lack of self-love. It's always a way that we're leaning away from ourselves, out of feeling that we need something from somebody else. We need, you know, validation, we need love, or whatever it might be. And as soon as we realize we're doing that, as soon as we realize and we see it, then we go, sheesh, I can't unsee that. I can't actually go back into that pattern, because that would be so dysfunctional. I can actually see what I'm doing. And as soon as we've seen what we're really doing, then you just can't carry on with it. I know for myself, having done that a few times, I just can't carry on with it. Once you know you're doing it, you can't do it you can't, the ego can't put it under your radar anymore. So you've shifted, and like it or not, you've shifted.
So a massive dynamic of coaching, right? Because often when people come and see us, they're looking at the obstacle and we help them to look at the path.
Yeah.
Right? Where your focus is, like if you're focusing on something that's not working, because your brain loves to do this, right? The brain loves to go, something's wrong with me, and I need to go and find all the things, and I need to fix all the things, and then I will be right. But what happens is the brain just goes and finds all the things, and it just gets really good at finding all the things. So you will always find all the things, right? And that dynamic can often keep you locked into nothing ever works out for me, right? Because your brain is trained to find all the things, as opposed to there is nothing wrong with me. Now, this is the caveat too, right? Because the ego can go, there's nothing wrong with me, so I don't need to look.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to there's nothing wrong with me, but I'm going to show up to my emotions. I'm going to do the work of being present to my emotions more and more consistently. I'm actually going to speed that up, because when I am with my emotional energy, because your emotions are all about point of attraction, right? How you feel determines what comes in, right? And get really good, that's going to shift the needle. Focusing on what's wrong, it never gets you to where you want to go.
No.
That's what the coaching dynamic is, right? To help people shift back into possibility. Let's stop pressing our head against the brick wall and go into how do you feel, because that's what you're really wanting, an emotional shift. And this is the thing, that when you do that stuff, when you do the work, you get what you want. Right? I had a client the other day who came in, she's like, oh, I'm being in my ego about it. And I know, it's like, go get it, girl, right? Like drop into certainty, know what it is that you want, be in that place of valuing your work. She went to the hairdresser, boom, new client. That, and again, she's sharing what she's excited about. There's no ego in that.
That's right.
So what they do, right, is they go materialism equals ego.
Yeah.
This is the thing about that. It's only ever your ego. Because that's all you have control over. It's not anybody else's ego. You don't actually know whether their ego is in their Lamborghini or not. They might have a whole bunch of joy in it. It's only ever your perception of somebody else's reality that puts the ego there. And we will be accountable for that and take our power back and go, if that person gets so much joy out of it, then I wish them 10 more. I love playing in that place of creation, right? Because it can show you so much very, very quickly about your own value. Right? Money, again, is that activator, which is kind of like, because you think about it, if you have no charge and no issue with it and you're holding high value for yourself, money's going to show up. It's not have any problem or agenda being with you, because you're owning your value, so money's just reflecting that. When we get into that place of like, I'm not good enough and I'm looking at the brick wall, money goes, okay, see ya, you can look at the brick wall. How we feel about all of it is so important. That's where self-love, is it loving to allow yourself to receive more? Absolutely, right? The universe is abundant and it's responding to what you choose. So having enough courage to, or desire, right, to choose more, to allow yourself to experience more. And again, the funny thing is, right, it's never about the money. It's about your creator ability. I've manifested some big money and it's like, this is awesome, not because of the money, but because I created it.
It's that trust in yourself again, isn't it?
Yes, it's the sensation of creator energy in your body. That's amazing, right? Because that stays with you moment to moment. The money comes and goes, right? But the creator ability, it's like, if I lost everything tomorrow, I'd still have this.
Exactly. Doesn't go.
Exactly.
So beautiful.
The best, right?
That's why it's so important to build that connection with ourselves and the universe, which is the same thing. So just to finish off with, maybe we could, I know you kind of have already given some personal examples kind of about how you personally have switched from being in that self-love of the small s and realized you were in it, and trying to feed yourself, from feeling not enough, and actually successfully kind of switched out of that back into the capital S self-love. Maybe like we could both give a little example of that just to finish off this.
Probably the first one that comes to mind, because I guess, I do help people with money. But for me personally, was realizing one day that I was wanting to make more money to prove something.
Right.
To prove something to family members, to prove something to myself. And then having this realization of like, oh, what is it that I'm trying to prove, right? I'm trying to prove that I'm worthy.
Yeah.
Because if I have the money, then I'll be worthy. And I was like, that is so weird, right? And often too, that is not something that is top of mind, right? You're not walking around your house going, oh, I'm trying to prove that to somebody today, right? It's in your subconscious.
Yeah.
And that only really comes forward from asking yourself and your body those questions, like what's actually standing in the way of me creating more of my desires. The fact that because of proving energy, again, it becomes more restrictive. Kind of going, okay, well, let's let go of that and let go of how it needs to look. And this is a big thing for entrepreneurs, right? Like there's a lot of entrepreneurs are like, well, I have to have so many people in my program, right? And then I will be good, right? Then I will have done it right. The ego loves to get in there and goes, oh, you've done it right or you've done it wrong. As opposed to like, what does it take to just show up in joyful creation?
Yeah.
Yourself, like releasing that, and then and then money always responds to that too, because there's no, instead of the bottleneck being like this, right, you've just opened it up to be in more expansiveness so you can receive more. So stuff like that, it really does pay to be aware of, right? Because it impacts everything, your ability to receive everything. And it's not just money, right? It's love or connection or intimacy or all those good juicy things that it is that you really, really want.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
probably what comes to mind for me, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you kind of mentioned my thing before that I was going to mention, so I might have to come up with something else. But what I was going to say was that I realized that in relationships, I am wanting to kind of almost save someone else in a sense, or like feeling sorry for that person, feeling guilty. Like there's a part of me going, oh, I should do that for that person because they're not feeling that good and I kind of want them to feel better. And I should maybe have sex with them. I should just watch this television program that I have no interest in because they need company, or I should, whatever, to make that person feel better. And that is, I've realized, a massive act of abandoning myself. Jeez. Like
every time you make those choices, you're going against yourself.
Exactly. But you feel like you're doing something for the relationship. You feel like you're bringing more, connection, harmony, intimacy. But ultimately you're not, because if I'm feeling sorry for that person, what am I saying to them? You're a victim. You're a victim, and you're weak. You're not enough. You're not able to do things for yourself. Imagine someone treating you like that. How patronizing.
Not so sexy, huh?
It's sexy. This is a grown person that can handle their own shit. I don't need to jump in there and handle their shit or make them feel better or whatever. And me trying to do that is creating a dynamic in the relationship that's really unhealthy and unfreaking fulfilling for both of us. So I have just decided that I'm not going to do that anymore. It's one of those things where you can't unsee it. And so if I'm focusing on what makes me feel really good and what I'm really enjoying doing and what lights me up and what I want to do for myself, that brings me into that sense of wholeness and connection with source within, and I'm loving that, that's better for the relationship than me leaning away from my truth and doing what they want to do, even though I don't really want to do it, and maybe every now and then, that's all good. But if it's something that's carrying on to the point where I'm feeling like, geez, this relationship sucks, and it sucks because I'm doing that, not because, and I can do something about that. So it's really, and relationships are so interesting because that you can see results so quick. As soon as you shift your energy, there's a palpable shift in the relationship. And I mean, it's one of those things, like with money, you can shift, and you might see immediate results maybe, but it might take a wee bit to filter in. But with relationships, you see it because the dynamic changes. So it's quite a good gauge for children. I've done it with children and hanging out with my children. And I think I mentioned this in one of my really earlier podcasts on this Patreon, that I was hanging out with them. I think it was probably school holidays. I was like, oh man, I really don't want to be doing this. I want to be doing that. I want to be over there. I don't want to be here. And I was in this real contracted energy, and they were being little shits. They were like tearing around and annoying the crap out of me. And then as soon as I realized, I went in, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm feeling. Self-awareness, come back to myself, be with myself. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm at inside. Man, that's a load of crap. I got to change the story and open up to the magic of the present moment. So I started looking around and looking at the beauty, because we were outside, looking at the beautiful things, appreciating nature, looking at their beautiful spirits. And it just shifted my energy. And then they shifted palpably and started being really beautiful, loving souls that they are, and it became harmonious. So children, definitely, they just feed off your energy. They just can't help it, and they'll act out because they've got no kind of filter mechanism yet. Mainly, they'll just blah, 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 do just reflect.
You're the fundamental truth, right? That you're the creator of your reality.
Yeah.
And when you shift, everything around you shifts, right? It's universal law. So, and the more accountability you take for that, the happier you're going to be. So many times people give their power away to the collective, to the government, to social media, to whatever is happening out there. There's nothing more powerful than you. You have total authority over yourself. You're sovereign, which means that you get to determine. So we need to often take our power back and go, there's nothing that has got control over me. My partner, my kids, my reality, my job, nothing. I'm choosing all of it, including how I'm showing up. So super powerful. Once you have that too, you experience a lot of liberation, right? Because it's like, it's up to me. I have authority over this. I can determine how this unfolds by where I place my focus and how that makes me feel.
Exactly, where I place my focus. How am I choosing to perceive the situation? Am I going to perceive it through the eyes of the ego and lack and not enoughness, or am I going to perceive it through, well, how would God see this? How would love see this? And then that just changes. And because I think people have a weird idea about control, because on some sense we can control certain things. I can get up and go to the toilet right now, but I can't control if there's an earthquake. I can't control if the government does this, that. But I can control I can take the higher path always, and I think that's the thing. And then taking the higher path then lines you up with a smoother ride, because you're not creating all these bumps and jumps, and which are self-created, because they're all the blocks, aren't they, that we then have to experience. If we have all those negative ways of thinking about things, we create realities out of them. Whereas if we jump into the higher path, we're seeing things more smoothly and creating this smoother experience where we're not so jolted by life, are we? And
I think that's the benefit of suffering, though, right, is to become more accountable.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're suffering in a way, it's a good thing to learn to lean in to take accountability for that.
Yeah.
And I know this can be super challenging when you are struggling. And again, depending on circumstances, right? Because some things are out of your control, but you always have control over how you feel. Realize, so I have control over that no matter what has actually happened. Because just like, because people would turn around and say, oh, what if you've lost a child or something? It's kind of like you can focus on the time and the experience of having that. You can focus on all the feelings that might actually not have anything to do with your grief. right? Maybe they're looking for love and acceptance and validation. Or you can actually, grieving can actually be really beautiful because it means you love so much.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's all a choice, right?
It is. And the gifts that you can get from these experiences, like losing a child, God, I can't even fathom how intense that would be. And then, but with something that's so intense, there's equal amount of gift, equal amount of opportunity, and it all depends on how you are going to choose to perceive that, whether you're going to rise above and find that higher perception, or you're going to, stay suffering with it. And yeah. All right, beautiful Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us today in this podcast. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I will place the links to your bits and pieces under this in the description here, if anybody wants to check you out. And anything you want to say to close?
Probably the only thing that I would encourage people to do is to create a relationship with yourself that you adore, like to do the work to create a relationship, like to make yourself your highest priority, because from there everything flows.
Yeah.
If you're committed to yourself first in terms of who am I, how do I really feel, what do I believe, what's important to me, what do I value, if you're prepared to start doing that kind of self-inquiry, the world will unfold at your feet, right? Yeah. Who you're choosing to be.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you so much, Rebecca. See you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.